Yeah. Today, you spoke about the need for creativity, but also preserving tradition. And the two seem almost apparently opposing forces: creativity and tradition. Doesn't tradition require a certain type of taqleed in the sense of a devotion to the past and a willingness to convey that past to future generations? Can we have a taqleed that's not just blind imitation, but a devotion to the past, critical engagement, or in a sense, to use your words, a taqleed that allows for the creation of a tradition that is authoritative but not authoritarian?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think this is what this is the big balance, the big mizan. Without the authoritative, we float aimlessly and we reinvent everything, and we become jack of all trades because no one can reinvent everything and do it well. So it's a presumption. What I mean by this, a presumption of deference. I presume the past to be authoritative unless there are reasons that arise for me to respectfully abandon the past. I never do it arrogantly, and I never do it with a sense of irreverence. I don't believe, I know enough about the intellectual tradition to know that even someone like Ibn Taymiyyah, who said horrible things about the Shia, for instance, but I have enough respect to know that in his time and place, he was a massive intellectual force, in the same way that his opponents were a massive intellectual force. I actually, I'll tell you that on so many things, especially when I write fatawa or people write me letters and I respond to them, I will quite often take the text of one of the predecessors that I'm going to disagree with, write something counter to, and I apologize to the book. I do it actually verbally. I say with all due respect and as if I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to break path with you. We've all, uprootedness is quite dangerous, because even if we have enough sense to anchor ourselves in our lives, the results for our children are devastating. I mean, if you are completely not rooted in any tradition, you might be okay because you might have enough knowledge to root yourself. But if your children don't grow up with a sense of reverence for any tradition, it's all gone. And I think sociologically, you'll see that this is quite true if you just look around you. But at the same time, it's like respecting, it's the reasonableness that Allah has imbued in us, has placed in us. Why is it that we respect anything in the past? We respect anything in the past because it was an ijtihad, an effort, a juhd, on part of the predecessors. They did their best within their context, and respect is part of dhikr, is part of remembrance, and it's part of ethics, it's part of akhlaq. Gratitude for anything that has been contributed by the past is part of proper ethics. But in the same time, losing autonomy vis-a-vis Allah is completely contrary to the very idea of ibadah, of submission. So if I become a slavish obedient to the past, and the past defines my relationship with Allah in a sense that it denies me the autonomy of genuine belief, then it now has become counter to its healthy purpose, and it has become an unethical paradigm. So, I mean, I have someone recently who wrote me saying that they were struggling with, well, okay, fine, I'll say it. They were struggling with hijab. And she was saying that she's struggling with hijab so much that when she prays, she feels completely disconnected from God. And in fact, she even stopped praying altogether. And the only reason she's wearing hijab is because of taqleed, of having a reverence for her teachers, and is praiseworthy. But having a reverence to the point of losing her prayers is unethical. I mean, it's either you believe in it, and this is, I mean, leave alone the evidence for hijab or lack of it. I mean, that's a separate matter that many voices should participate in. And I would dream of the day of having the best daring scholars come together and have a thorough hashing of the adillah on this matter, and a thorough discussion of the various jurisprudential principles, on the condition that they actually be daring thinkers, you know, whichever way they ultimately fall, and knowledgeable thinkers. Can you imagine how wonderfully rich and invigorating a discussion like that would be? To actually hash down the adillah. I want to hear hashing down the adillah on slavery. You know, when I hear that historians say, oh, the Prophet owned slaves, I don't believe it. But I would love a complete, thorough discussion on something like that. Anyway, but either you believe in it or you don't, or you do it just as taqleed. And if you do it just as taqleed, and to the point that you no longer have any connection with Allah, then I don't know what it means. I don't know what it means anymore. I mean, there was someone who once told me that, well, you know, if I just fast because my family wants me to fast, but when I fast, I don't do it for Allah. I don't feel anything. Just don't bother fasting. Is that radical in our faith? Isn't that what we're taught, that everything is according to your niyyah? Niyyah is the anchor of all belief, of all practice, and if it doesn't exist, now when does taqleed vitiate the niyyah? At what point does taqleed become your niyyah is to imitate, not to please Allah? That's what I think is problematic.
Niyyah's intention.
Huh?
Niyyah.
Yeah, your intent, your motive.
Here you go. Yeah. In reference to the issue of fitna and coming the final day or the last day or whatever, there is another narrative, I think, in this Islamic history that calls a sort of retreat or disqualification of authority. I remember that the case in point could be the conquest of Andalusia, when Sharisi issued a fatwa and called every Muslim in the region to go back to their countries. Or even the same when Sharisi also later on issued, I think, another fatwa, or within the same body of the first fatwa, that said the Meduhar, That was the word for local Muslims, Spanish origin Muslims. Meduhar ulema, thinkers and scholars, are not authorized to pronounce the rulings of the Sharia. I know that Usuli school of thought does not really buy this argument, and of course, as a student of yours, I'm pretty familiar with the Usuli school of thought. But at one point, there must be an argument against not only the Fatan ahadith, but also this type of disqualification of authorities. You just mentioned that Al-Azhar has issued a fatwa that, okay, hijab is over, nobody can even talk
Azhar
about
actually, not just that, they said, supports your point, by the way, said, and I know who they mean by this, those who are issuing fatwas on hijab, and they mean the people in America, certain person.
Of course.
Stop issuing fatwas.
I know.
Stop issuing fatwas.
I can imagine that. Yes.
And so they actually explicitly said that. It's exactly the same. I mean, it's sort of this sense of civilizational insecurity makes us say, no, let's keep it all home. We don't want your interventions. But they're not at the frontier. If we use the imagery of the Islamic tradition, they're not on a thaghr min thughur al-Islam. They're sitting under Sisi, having Amn al-Dawla protect them, right? And whoever they want can go to War al-Shams, behind the sun, disappear. Same with the Saudi religious authorities. But who's sitting at the frontiers? And when Sharisi, his same dynamic was at the same time, a mufti who was in Andalus during the height of the Inquisition, when he issued a fatwa that you can do your prayers without shudrud or ruku'ah, so that you're not outed by the Inquisition and killed. I understand most fatwas as highly contextual. When Sharici is sitting in the heart of Muslim lands, preserving a conservative function, while Wahrani is saying don't do your ruku' and sujood in public, because if you do, the Inquisition will burn you alive, so just do it silently. Jurisprudentially, Wahrani is far more interesting than what Sharici. The idea of ruku' and sujood without actual physical ruku' and sujood, jurisprudentially, is far more intriguing than when Sharisi, who tells us keep it all home. But I'm happy you brought this up, because I am very troubled. 30 years ago, I probably told you this before. Amir, I've known Amir forever, and any of you take courses with him, by the way? If the Islamic civilization was healthy, Amir would be sitting on a chair professorship in an Islamic university, or any university. Anyway, it's just the victims of our civilizational decline are so many. 30 years ago, I was at ISNA, and they were engaging in all this stuff about how wonderful we are and how great our community are and so on. And I got up and I said, look around you in the room. Did I tell you a story before? Yeah, I did tell it to other people. I said, look around you in the room. How many converts are in this room? There were about 100 people in this room, and there were maybe 2 converts. And I said, that's the proof of Islam's failure in this country. And I still feel this way, because Islam on the thughur, on the frontiers, if it is unable to persuade the other, then it has ghettoized itself. And it has become an entirely internal phenomena that will not be at the cusp of dynamic human thought. It is the Islam of the Thuhur, Islam of the frontiers, has always interested me far more of the Islam of the mainland. And that's a huge, the fact that Muslims at the frontier, Muslims in the US, go get all their theology and all their law from Islam of the mainland, leave alone Saudi or even Egypt or Morocco, is disastrous. It means we're failing. We're failing by all measures. Because we're not borrowing and developing. We are simply reproducing. You know, what's that expression, putting a round peg in a square hole? Or how do you say that expression?
Putting a round peg in a square hole.
Oh, okay. It doesn't work. Just not gonna work. It's. Anyway, I interrupted you anyway.
No, that was my question. I mean,
yeah.
the other, my argument was, in fact, my issue was the other way around. That, okay, Fatan narrative comes from Wahhabism, or those who believe in some sort of sitting down and doing nothing, and just acquiescing to whatever goes on, because we don't want to change the status quo. But the other, the alternative was, at least at the time that I took an example of, was, you know, disqualifying people who do have authority to decide, just because you mentioned they are at the frontiers.
Yeah.
And I believe whenever we've seen in the history of Islamic civilization a development, a progress, most of the time has been coming from the people who were at the frontiers. I mean, in my case, in Iran, it was the Najaf ulama and mujtahids who issued fatwas in favor of mashrutiyat and constitutionalism, not the Iranian sitting in Tehran. Or the other way around, when Iraq was occupied by the British Empire, it was the Iranian jurists who, you know, fought, and also the ones who were at the front row of the fight. So I mean,
you know, because of this, when I came to the U.S. In the 80s, exactly precisely because of this history, I used to have this dream that it will be American Muslims or Muslims in the West who are going to be at the frontier of developing Islamic thought, because exactly that they're because that's what history exactly illustrates.
right.
And it was quite crushing to discover that that potential was never realized. I mean, in the 80s, we actually really believed it. We really hoped that it's going to be Muslims in the West with their combination of intellectual freedom, of thought, civilizational values, studying what went wrong with Western civilization and what went right, that they're going to then create the synthesis that will be an invigorating spark. What I personally believe is that Islamophobia is in large part is an awareness, especially after the Iranian Revolution, is an awareness that is a real potential. And Islamophobia was developed specifically to help derail that potential and nip it in the bud.
That's right. Exactly when we had the Bannerman report in the early 20th century, in 1910, 1915, which was directed against the similar constitutional movements, constitutionalist movements that were carrying out and happening in the Muslim societies.
One, and this is the last question.
Because we have to go after that.
You're in Orange County, right?
Well,
Yeah, 2 hours, 2 hours
May
drive.
Allah bless you. I don't know how you do it.
Well-
You're superhuman.
well, no,
We cannot miss a great
I think
individual like
it's
that.
a selfish
It is
desire
worth it,
because probably I'm the oldest one in the room, but I'm still learning because who or what really ignited your intellectual curiosity about Islam? And I don't want another halaqa. I just want to use it because I think this is. You mentioned a lot that Islam and Muslim intelligentsia are not inspiring anyone. My father was in Al-Azhar, and I used to sit with those mashayikh, and I was about 12, 15 years old. I love sitting and listening to them, but when they talk to the public, they are so boring and so dull. Okay, so this is why inspiring me to listen to you, because this is a unique experience that probably we should learn how to transmit it.
My first inspiration, clearly, my mother. I mean,
And at what age?
I mean, my mother, other than memorizing the Quran, but my mother was the one who read my first books with me. But her attitude towards knowledge, but but other than my mother, I mean, I was fortunate enough studying with Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, who was quite aware that the mashayikh think intelligent conversations about fiqh is something that they can only trust fellow mashayikh with, and that when you speak to the public, you speak in umumiyat. You never introduce the public to any nuances about anything. And in fact, they would often, we were all taught that you don't tell the public about ikhtilaf, and you don't talk about tarjih, and you don't talk about minority points of view, istisna'at fil mazhab, and you don't give the public licenses, because there's a big culture of distrust of the public as ignorant and stupid and so on. But Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali had a very different attitude. And I'll tell you, my last meeting with him, I had gone to the United States already, and when I first came to the United States, I was taking all these courses in political philosophy and religious studies, and some of them really shook my faith. And I remember I corresponded with him several times about them, but then I had my last meeting with him. I told him, sometimes the ideas make me feel irreverent towards Allah. And he said, and this is a testament to his greatness. He said, you can only be true to yourself, so your aqidah either is built on truth or built on nothing. So ultimately, there is no ajr in avoidance of knowledge under the guise of protecting your iman. And this left a huge impact on me, because the first time I was exposed to the Orientalists, Montgomery Watt and Goldziher and Schacht, and the stuff they said about Islam was so destabilizing. And this is another thing. Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali also, and before him my mother, I have to admit, because she also said the same thing. I said, they say this, and they say this, and they say this, and they say this, and I don't know, and then my Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali said, well, is it true? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, then it's your job to know. Research if it's true or not. Saying I don't know is not good enough. He said, go find where they got it from and study it. And that, I had a lot of shuyukh that were not like that. I had a lot of shuyukh that, when they heard that, I was, I told them about Nietzsche and what Nietzsche said. They kept saying, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. How can you say astaghfirullah? I had that. But Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali would listen and shake his head and say, good, so what do you think about that? So how do you respond to that? That was very liberating. And so was my mother, because she also had that same attitude. Of course, she was not, by the way, an intellectual at all. But at all. Fitra. She had actually listened to my whole spiel and say, I know you want to lecture. I just lecture. Don't worry. And she would continue cooking, and then just throw in the occasional question here or there. Until now, I don't know if she was listening to me at all. But her questions were saying, and so who responded to him? And then I would go off on that. And who responded to him? I don't know if she was listening till now. And I wish I asked her before she passed away. Well, we want the Usuli Institute to create this as a sunnah for so many. That's what I dream of. Because it as Rami pointed out, in reasoning with God, your iman must tell you, as long as there is Allah, there is no defeat. There's just the faith in Nasrullah is an article of faith, and whether you see it in your lifetime, and only the short-sighted thinks of victory in terms of power. Victory is not about power; it's about enlightenment. That's when a person is victorious, is when they become enlightened and true to themselves. That's the Nasr. That's the Fatah. Having power is from hitam al-dunya, the mundaneness of life. It has no value. That's not victory. In fact, many times, power is the definition of defeat. That's why we have so many failed marriages. Barakallah feekum wa afakum, and thank you guys for coming so much.
What is the next step? Where we are going to go from here?
On my part, I will prepare the next halaqa. I leave all organizational matters to, where is my son? He's always hiding. Here you are.
Directly in hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, hiding in plain sight. It's because of that coat, the white coat. It makes you like disappear because you're so white. I can't see it. The next organizationally, it's between these two guys right now.